Looking at the Singapore Malays' position in economic achievement is a bit baffling. Why is it so? They are in the lower rungs of financial material wealth. That is, the poorest community in Singapore, which are the Singapore Malays compared to other races, when in reality, it shouldn't be so. The Singapore Malays have to be rightfully the most successful, the most prosperous in Singapore. The reasons are both historical and geographical, but in reality, it is far from the truth. The Singapore Malays are living from salary to salary, some under social welfare assistance or only family support. It is a cultural enigma. There are many reasons to speak of, but mentioning only the few prominent reasons why the Singapore Malays are lagging backward compared to other ethnic groups in Singapore like the Chinese or Indians. As we know, the Malays lack a strong business culture and, well, lack the emphasis in the pursuit of knowledge. In the early period of British colonialism, the Malays, notably the Bugis people and the Sumatran Minang people, were good, successful traders. Singapore's history grew with these indigenous people. But after World War II, the British left Singapore. With the influx of traders from the Middle East, India and China, the local Malays, well, they failed to continue the legacy of early Malay traders. European spice traders, Indonesian seafarers, Arab traders and Chinese traders were the mainstay of business during the early British days. Those days, they traded in spices, textiles and commodities much sought after by the West, the Middle East and China. The Malays failed to capitalize on this trading route. If they had done so by now, the Singapore Malays might have created huge generational wealth. During the early British period, there was a huge influx of Chinese immigrants, Arabs, Indians, and Armenians to Singapore and Southeast Asia. They were escaping turmoil and poverty back home. They toiled and worked hard, and later on, they saw the economic potential of Singapore, making it one of the busiest ports in the world. Here, the local Malays lost in numbers and competitiveness. And second, in post-war Singapore, they failed to take advantage, to be a part of Singapore's prosperity as a trading post, as a busy shipping business hub. Singapore as an island nation is very pro-business, and the Malay are not there. They don't own big businesses, not in property, not in manufacturing, and not in investments. Another factor that leads to the Malays being left behind is the inability to pursue knowledge, to study hard, and to value education and knowledge as the greatest asset. But I am very hopeful now that the younger generations are realizing not to be left behind in education and striving hard for better achievements in the future. This, I am optimistic. And lastly, the Singapore Malay failed to take advantage or participated in the vast business potential of its neighboring countries, namely Malaysia and Indonesia or Brunei. These countries' economies are expanding by leaps and bounds. Living in a huge, vast Malay majority region has its advantages. The Singapore Malays can easily merge or participate in their growing prosperity by investing, opening businesses or dealing with trade and commodities or local produce. But they chose not to. The Singapore Malays are reluctant to participate in business with neighboring countries, either because they are afraid or there is a deep mistrust, which stems from a lack of confidence or maybe capital. The Singapore Malays with its strong currency advantage can easily set up business, for example in Malaysia, more easily so with a common racial background. But unfortunately, the Singapore Malays lack the will to cooperate and compete in neighboring markets. If opening or starting a business in Singapore is expensive, why not cross overboard to neighboring countries? Any business person or investor would love to invest or do business in Malaysia or Indonesia, with its huge, vast consumer markets. And I believe Malaysians would love to buy products from Singapore Malays too. The market potential is waiting, but instead it is the Singapore Chinese who invested heavily in Malaysia and Indonesia, opening businesses, buying properties, even buying plantations in Malaysia and Indonesia, thus becoming rich and prosperous in their ventures. Sadly, the Singapore Malays, they chose to be introverts and avoid challenges. Being weak in entrepreneurial spirit, they were unable to rise up to changes, or worse, harboring a negative mindset, stereotyping and prejudicing towards their neighboring Malay brethren as backward, slow, untrustworthy, and so on. So, sad to say, the Singapore Malays are destined to be where they are now, not a successful and prosperous community, and not contributing much to Singapore's progress, even though we are living in a very dynamic, wealthy, fast-moving part of the world. That is Singapore.